All right, we might get started then. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the Evaluation of Research Interest Group's first plenary session. And welcome to the online participants as well. So my name is Emma Crott. I am Chief of Staff at the Australian Research Data Commons, and I'm a co-chair of this interest group along with my colleague Amy Nuremberg. And I'll run through the other co-chairs in a moment. So welcome to the new RDA members. Oh, and I think I'm supposed to let you know about the RDA Code of Conduct as well. So as I said, I am a co-chair of this interest group along with Amy, who's here in person. Unfortunately, our colleagues, Francois Genova was unable to be here in person, and Devika Madali is also an apology. But the four of us are co-chairing this interest group. So for today's session, we have three parts to the agenda. I'll just give a quick welcome and overview of the group's aims and activities, where we've transitioned from a bird of a feather to an interest group. I'll then hand over to Amy, who will run through some of our current and foreseen activities and facilitate a discussion with you all in the room and online. And then we'll spend the last 15 minutes just confirming what our next steps are and identifying our and aligning our goals for the next plenary session. And you'll see there's a QR code for the collaborative notes. So I encourage you all to please open that doc up and add in your name and institution and your interest in the group, and also add to the notes as we go through this session as well. So as I mentioned, this interest group, this is our first session as an interest group. At Plenary 19, we had a bird of a feather session where we were engaging the community to see whether there was interest to start an interest group looking at the evaluation of research. And we did a call for volunteers to help set up that interest group proposal. Between P19 and 20, there was discussion group gathering volunteers, a draft charter which was put together by the group, and the identification of the four co-chairs. So we have regional and disciplinary range. So we've got coverage in the chairs from Europe, India, Australia, and America. And then we also identified a list of relevant RDA groups. At P20, the BOF discussion was around the draft charter, which was prepared by the volunteers, and that included input presentations from other RDA groups and CORA. We then submitted the charter in May, and that was endorsed by Council in June. And as I said, today is our first kickoff meeting as a group. So the primary aim of the Evaluation of Research Interest Group is to advocate for fair data and software as research outputs within research evaluation frameworks. A key objective of the group is to coordinate relevant RDA efforts and liaise with and contribute expertise to funders, organisations, CORA, which is the Coalition of Advancing Research Assessment, and other global research evaluation assessment initiatives. So the interest group has been pretty active to date. We've spoken to our members to see whether we have identified the relevant RDA groups, and we've announced a task group who have been working on a landscape analysis. We've participated in 2 RDA cross-fertilisation workshops. One was specifically on research evaluation in July, and then another one on engagements with disciplines, RDA for disciplinary data on the 30th of August. Then the task group met to work on the landscape analysis, and Amy's going to present some of the initial findings of that. And we also had our first stakeholder forum meeting in September. And this includes a range of stakeholders in the research evaluation space, as well as RDA groups. So it's very clear from the past few years, well, the last few BOFs and setting up this interest group, we've spent a lot of time chatting about the challenges and facing research evaluation. And I'm sure you're all aware that it is a large and difficult beast. And these are by no means all of the challenges, but some things that we've discussed to date has been a need to change the evaluation culture of research organisations and the community. Identifying qualitative and quantitative criteria, enabling to measure the impact of research activities beyond bibliometrics. Working together in a fragmented landscape to progress at the international, regional, national and local levels. Definitely a consideration of discipline-specific maturity and needs assessment. For example, we know that the humanities, arts and social sciences are notoriously difficult to evaluate and other qualitative research. And coordinate RDA contributions and make it recognised from both inside and outside RDA. So, as I mentioned, there's been a lot of global initiatives and organisations recognising the need for research evaluation and the important contribution of data and software to that landscape. And this is just one quote from the UN GA Science Summit, demonstrating that the reward, recognition and support of the diversity and roles of responsibilities and their importance in the overall academic research ecosystem is key. I'll hand over to Amy now.
Absolutely. The passing of computer is the most important part of this entire thing, and we got it done. So let me second again Emma's welcome to this session and appreciation of your presence here. As she stated, this space is complex and there's a lot of work to do. So we're really happy to have you be here as part of the people who are interested in seeing that work get done. So to start off with that, we want to go over what we've done so far as an interest group and where we think we might be going, and not just where we think it might be going, but really opening it up to the community to think about where we need to go. We recognize the complexity of this space. We recognize the need for inclusivity, for multiple perspectives, for appreciation of the complexities and difficulties here. So we really hope that this spurs a good discussion, although acknowledgedly, the room isn't the greatest for discussion, but we are going to make it work. I have faith in all of you for this. So together, what we've done, where we're going. To start off, from our charter, we had a list of initial topics. Again, this is a space that has a lot of challenges. This was our first attempts in saying, where can we start to address these? So we wanted to look at what's currently going on in the RDA, other external efforts, and start mapping those into a better understanding of what this landscape looks like and how we might incorporate pieces of it into the conversation as a whole. From there, we also, in parallel, built up the stakeholder forum, which, as you can see, is a gathering of links, relevant information. Again, external groups who are also working in this area, along with Quora, and then creating liaison arrangements with those groups. So we have named liaisons from each of the RDA groups that share an interest. And if you are a member of one of those groups or a co-chair and have not been contacted as a liaison yet, please follow up with Emma or myself after this session, because we want you to be a part of this conversation. And then finally, looking at the other areas in those spaces. For the discussion today, we really want to engage with you around identifying additional topics, other groups that we've missed, other places that we need to invite to the table for these discussions, and then act overall as an industry group in RDA as this incubator for where work can come from. So how we can establish groups to do some of the work, to initiate those activities that we know we need to take, those small steps that are just going to push us that extra little bit forward to this very simple problem of changing the culture of research and its associated evaluation. So one of our task groups was in this mapping activity. These are the results of a preliminary landscape analysis. So these are just first steps in discussion, kind of the ideas that we had. And again, welcome your inputs on how these are classified, sorted out, what groups we might have missed in these areas. So our expected outcomes for this exercise were to be able to document how RDA might position itself, defining the role that RDA has in this space as a global organization, and identifying the interfaces and potential collaborations. So this is a typology of the concepts and activities related to the evaluation of research as represented across the RDA. This was our initial list of RDA relevant groups. You can see there are some there. This is what we started off with in the charter, as you can see. We've had a few more suggested from the presentation from our stakeholder forum and from the carousel. I don't remember what that was called, Emma. The cross-disciplinary, interdisciplinary carousel as well. So this is where we started. And of course, not on the slide yet are all of the other groups, the sessions I went to, and I'm like, oh, we need to talk to you about it, how you play into evaluation of research for those. So here are some of the typologies, the possible categorizations that we came up with as part of this preliminary work. And really a lot of the credit for this work goes to Francoise and the work that she's put into and her expertise just in the history of RDA, what groups exist, what they've been working on, these types of areas. So we have the categories. We have stakeholder representation, who has a piece of skin in that game, right? Who should be at the table to be talking, to be listened to about these things. Different types of research outputs, how they might be assessed, how metrics might be assigned to them, what those relevant properties are. Disciplinary aspects, recognizing different disciplines, look at what research is differently, how it's evaluated differently. So that facet of it as well. And then really the idea of community support to deal with this evolving context that we know that we're playing in, because it's not a static space. It's constantly changing based on cultural understandings, social conditions, as well as the technology that we have available to enable different changes. So again, if you have not yet logged into the collaborative notes, there is a bit.ly link on every single slide. You have not missed your opportunity. Please put your name there to register that you attended the meeting. But also, as we go through this, as we have the discussion, as we identify areas of work, you have another opportunity to sign up, to get some of this work done, to be the change that you want to see in the world. So for ideas of stakeholder representation, here are some of the things that we have, right? There's the funders as a stakeholder kind of category there, organizations as research performing organizations, other types of organizations, publishers are in that space. We have geographic stakeholders because different geographies, different political boundaries, different understandings, different methods of evaluating research, different methods of appreciating it. We have the early career perspective as opposed to later career perspectives on how research might be evaluated and understood. And we're really excited to also bring in the RDA domain ambassadors and seeing how that group launches and using that as another way of bringing in opinions, stakeholders into the conversation. One of our other categories was this research outputs and relevant properties. And in here, we want to talk about data. We want to talk about code, broadly speaking. You know, there's code snippets, there are software, there are HPC compute environments, which we've all captured, I know, inadequately under the category heading of code. Physical samples and collections, yet another research output where we want to be able to respect and consider the outputs as part of the overall evaluation. The aspects of what do repositories contribute to our understanding of what are the materials out there? How do we look at how those materials are being used? What is the role there in that space? And then again, the instruments, the PID for instruments, there's a role there as well. And certainly a question about hardware. What about hardware? Is that another space for stakeholders that we should be looking at and thinking about these outputs and evaluations? Possible metrics and criteria. Here are the groups at RDA who are currently, to our knowledge, involved in these areas of activity, of consideration. One of the ones I would add to that you may have seen on a previous slide is the assessment of reproducibility group. The disciplinary aspects are yet another facet to this conversational space. And we have all sorts of different disciplinary groups in RDA. So again, we really want to make this space a space where you can come represent your discipline's cares and concerns to the overall conversation of research evaluation. And then finally, the community support to deal with this context. There are all sorts of those. So this was, hopefully brief overview of that first kind of mapping exercise that the task force group was involved in. Again, this is a very preliminary result. This is not the end of that work for that mapping task force group. We need to do more mapping. We know that we haven't captured everything yet. We know that the categories aren't exactly right at this point, but that's where we started. And I'd like to start opening up the discussion point now for questions, for thoughts. How do we want to think about proceeding into what's going to happen next? So questions about what you've seen now, and then we can talk about what next steps are. And for questions, it's a large room. We do not have microphone runners to my knowledge, but there are microphones you can line up at. So I know it's after lunch. Stand up, make a move to those microphones. You can start waking yourself up just a little bit for that. Would love to entertain any questions.
I'm Francis Crowley. I'm on a couple of RDA working groups, and also I'm on the CoData IDPC group, the policy group. I just want to say thank you very much. Thank you for the session. Thank you for the initiative. In some ways, I'm sitting here thinking this is the most important session of the whole conference. And maybe that's exaggerated in a way, but if we're going to achieve the goals that we want to have for data sharing, for data curation, anything to do with data really, and then again for AI as well, again. And also if we're going to achieve the goals that we want to have for open science, then it is absolutely essential that we reform our research assessment. It's a really basic need, and it's a huge job. So I congratulate you for even thinking about taking it on and trying to do it there. So I don't really have anything to add, because I think you've laid out the landscape in a very nice way. You've done your homework. It looks very promising. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. And we appreciate the vote of confidence. I realize this is a very large space, and it's kind of that principle of you model up to where you want to be. And the work of this group is to scale that down into what's the next feasible step that gets us on that pathway to achieve it. So thank you very much for that, Francis.
So my name is Andrea Medina Smith. I represent NIST here at RDA, and as usual, Francis stole my thunder, but that's okay. The other thing that I didn't see maybe enough of, but I want to be looking at evaluation of all types of research. So broadly describing research, but also what's driving that research? What are the policies, and how are those policies being evaluated as well? So that's my little push, is that we look at more than just research.
So if you could stay there for a minute, Andrea, I just have a follow-up question for you. With that question of like, what are the policies, what are the motivators, are you asking that from that this should be part of how research is evaluated, or more as, hey, you need to pay attention to this as a place that drives that assessment of research?
So the latter,
Okay.
and then also on a personal side, I'm interested in how we evaluate policies themselves to say whether they are successful or not. Are they driving the type of research that they purport to be driving?
Thank you.
My name is Matthew Lucas, and I'm with the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. But for this purposes, I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Funders Forum group for RDA. And I think I'm the Funders Forum liaison for this interest group as well. So the next meeting I will be at, I promise. So I think it's obvious that for funders, this is an extremely important topic. And so I'll just echo the thanks for taking this on. And I was thinking, so there's obviously a lot of work going on in different funding agencies thinking about what does excellence mean, what does research assessment have to mean, some of it coordinated through the organizations you've already mentioned, but a lot of work going on behind the scenes as well. And perhaps at a future meeting, I just want to put on the table, maybe we could have some presentation from funders that are doing some exploratory work right now to see how it might align and see if the directions are the same. And certainly I'd say, I know you spoke at the Funders Forum meeting in Gothenburg, and so maybe having you come back at our next Funders Forum meeting would be a great conversation to have.
We would be delighted to enact both of those suggestions. Thank you, Matthew, for that. Emma, do we have any questions from online? Not yet. Okay, I appreciate the hope. Any other question? Oh, I'm sorry, there's a line. Yes, please, next.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be the plus, I don't know, whatever number for Francis. I think that this is one of the most important sessions. What would I say? So there's a lot of movement in this space because funders are realizing that they need this information, and institutions also want this information. And so I think one thing is key is to link up with the ongoing work. I'm thinking about, I can't remember the name of the group in the US. They just had a meeting in Washington that was not online, it was just in person. And then there's Research on Research, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. There's a number of other initiatives. So I think like trying to put what we can, NIH has some good work on research impact. And then also thinking about like where can we be additive? So going, following the ROR, the Research on Research work and research impact. Some of it is, indecipherable. Like it's so nuanced that you can't. It's hard to translate that into action or guidance for policymakers. So I think like thinking where RDA could be additive. We need machine actionable kind of metadata related to research impact. So if we can think a bit more about what we have and where it is, and then where we could maybe work on the metadata side, or I'm trying to think of what else. But I think like starting with a bit of a landscape analysis. So personally, I'm working on a scoping review of the costs, benefits and harms of data reuse, because I think we don't tell a convincing story. We can't make the value proposition for data reuse for funders, or for the folks that we want to invest in their data, or for the folks whose data we want to use. And when we're thinking about data reuse, so we need to better understand the metadata within that life cycle to also understand what's working and what's not working in research translation and research impact. But I do also, with Francis, stand in thanking you for taking this on, because it's a huge task, and we'd love to be supportive however we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the thanks, and also for the ideas around the machine actionable metadata. I was just at a session around fair workflows, and I think there's some real promise there with some of the platforms that they were talking about in that space. So we've invited them to interface with us as a liaison to our stakeholders forum to make sure that we have some of that work represented. And then I encourage you as well, please sign up in the second table as someone who would like to participate in this work, especially in that mapping area. We'd really appreciate your insight. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, Martin Rittman from Crossref. So this is probably to echo the last comment, and part of this is on us and our community, but I think machine actionable metadata is really important. I mean, you had on the list, what indicators, what things would you like to see and measure, but you need really easy access to those things as well. And maybe some of the organizations who want to carry out the evaluation and do the downstream evaluations, they may not necessarily have the capabilities to handle that are there tools that they would need as well to be able to handle this and do it in a sensible way rather than just let's count citations on journal articles, because that's very outdated.
Yes, I think we have general agreement that just counting the citations is not the direction we want to go. So much appreciated there. We don't just want to count the citations. We do want to be thoughtful about the metrics that we talk about creating for evaluation of research. And of course, because we want those metrics to represent a complex state, they themselves will be complex and difficult. And part of the challenge in this space is to avoid the easy just because it's easy, right? We want a thing that is more representative, and that will be challenging. So thank you for that. Yes.
Thank you. I am Anne Cambron-Thompson. I'm one of the co-chairs of the SHARC group,
Yes.
Sharing Rewards and Credit. So I just want to make a little update on this group and relation with the group on evaluation. We presented the first draft of the recommendations that are the results of that group in Göteborg. And this, we are refining them, and this should be submitted for comments to before the end of this year. So of course, this group is one of the target group for contributing to these recommendations. So I just wanted to do that. And then I have a second point and proposal or discussion. Every second year, there is in Europe ESOF, Euroscience Open Forum, which is a little bit the same kind of meeting that AAA is in US. And the next one will be in June 2024 in Katowice in Poland. And the call for submitting sessions is open, and the date, a closing date for submitting is the 31st of December 2023. And I think it would be very good if this group could propose a session. And one of the theme of the thematic area for this Euroscience Open Forum, ESOF, is changes within scientific excellence. And I think that within this topic, our topic of this group is completely relevant, and that could open to, there is usually quite a big affluence in this ESOF. So I would like to propose that a submission is considered.
All right, thank you so much for both of those suggestions and recommendations. For the first one, the SHARC update, when that output starts being circulated within the RDA community, I definitely think that we can help amplify that and highlight that. I would also encourage everyone here, as members of the RDA community, you have the ability, you have the right to go in there, look at that output, provide your comments back to the SHARC group, who I'm sure would be interested to hear from you about what your thoughts, if you think it is appropriate, if you think it addresses, if there are places where it could be improved, or if it is just the absolutely most wonderful thing you have ever seen. All of those comments would be appreciated. And please take the opportunity that RDA offers you to look at that, to review that, to comment, to feedback. If you are not a member of the RDA community yet, there's no time like the present. Just go sign up. It's free. It's pretty easy. And then you can comment on outputs like this. You too can shape the future. Yes.
Hi, Shannon Sheridan, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. This is my first time at one of your group meetings, and so I think this is awesome. I love the idea, and it's really cool to hear what you guys have done and what you're planning on doing. And I just want to, in terms of next steps, throw this out for consideration. Probably not short term, but one of the things that I haven't really noticed on here, aside from a couple of the RDA groups, is taking this evaluation and then actually going out to the researchers and figuring out and engaging with them on how to make those changes happen and become more commonplace. So obviously I have to figure out the evaluation portion first, but I figure if I get it on the notes now, it'll be there in the back of everybody's mind while we're working. So
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for that. That's one of the things that we do hope to address early on and accomplish with the involvement of the disciplinary groups as part of the stakeholder forum, is to not only get the researcher voice early on about what would be valuable, what would be useful, what they want to see that shape become, but also scholarly societies in that space, recognizing part of the role they have in that conversation with their members too. So thank you for the suggestion. Thank you. I'm gonna go over here.
Yeah, Katrina McCallum, I'm at Wiley. I have conflict of interest because I was on the steering committee of DORA from when we relaunched about 2017 till last year sometime. So I think it's fantastic that what you're doing and bringing it to the RDA, because the RDA does actually implementation and stuff and brings so many people together. I would encourage you just to work with DORA as well as the other ones that you've got, partly because they've been collecting resources and they're doing research projects on this. But the main point is to explicitly, and I've said this elsewhere in RDA, in the sessions this week, is to explicitly include a discussion of the inequity around or the causes of some of the deep inequities in the system to research evaluation, particularly the pressure on those from lower middle income countries, global south, to publish in Western global north journals and be assessed by essentially Western views of meritocracy. And largely the cultural and academic capital sits in the West and the North. And this creates, especially I've been involved in a lot of the paper mill work and attractions, we're seeing authors who are otherwise genuine, so desperate to get a publication in an English journal that they're going down really perverse routes and being incredibly heavily penalized for doing so. And so with that as well, it's lovely that you've got that connection with funders. And if there's ways that we can include funders from the sort of Asia region, South America, Africa region as well, because it feels to me that there's a sort of, the pressure and hyper competition in the West is appalling. It seems to me almost that it's worse in some other areas, and how can we bring on the institutions and not bring on, but collaborate with them to work in a way that is meaningful within that context.
Yes, thank you very much for raising that and highlighting it. I think that has to be part of any discussion when we're thinking about the system of evaluation of researchers. And again, it goes back to that idea of inclusivity, of voices, of regions, of expectations, and understanding. So the last thing I think any of us would really want to, starting from where we are, we don't want to change to another system that is forced upon or has, is insensible to the potential of inequities and bias. So keeping those thoughts top of mind and making sure that those voices are included at the table. So thank you again for highlighting that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Benjamin Long from NIST. Andrea, who spoke earlier, is my colleague, and some of my other colleagues are here as well. I'm really new to RDA as well, first timer in this session, and so my perspective may not fit the mold, if you will, but I kind of look at every session I'm in, including this one, as sort of these paths through the map of the life cycle of research and data science itself at different levels of strata. And I see this session as a unique point on that map, where in a sense, every BOF, every IG, every working group is in a sense doing a test drive of what data science is and of what all of these things are. And they may each implement that or instantiate that differently. But this group in this effort seems to have a unique position of looking at what's invariant across all of those and essentially defining the game to the next level of maturity. And from the unique point of view of evaluation, that seems appropriate. So this seems like a really wonderful opportunity for the future.
Well, thank you very much for that. And thank you for being bold enough to say, I'm a first timer and maybe this won't fit. We want those bold voices. If you think your perspective might not fit, it's okay. Please speak up. We want to hear these ideas. And yes, I think this group is unique in RDA. We're going out there with that idea of trying to find, as you say, some of the commonalities about what can be said about an evaluation of research and where the differences are as well. And again, to appreciate both of those aspects with across research and evaluation of that. Thank you so much for your thanks, for your appreciation. That's been fabulous. And I want to take all of that now and say, that's excellent. What are we actually going to do with that energy, with that thanks, with that appreciation? I know this is preaching to the choir now, so we can look out to you and say, okay, now's the time to give, right? What can we give in terms of doing work, in terms of taking action, of being involved in activities? Here are some of the ongoing activities we have already scoped for the group. These include a continuation of that analysis of RDA role within the larger evaluation of research landscape. We are also thinking about how to identify and bring in more of the relevant RDA entities, other external initiatives in that, working with explicitly the early career and engagement interest group. So these are some of the activities we already have planned. These are some of the ones that we have thought about doing. As proposed in the charter, there's this collection of relevant documents. What is the literature basis across evaluation of research? Who are all of the research initiatives that are working in this place? Thank you again for the reminder that Dora has an extensive collection of work in this space. I know at my own institution, we have a Center for Research and Open Science that I'm sure can contribute things as well. And it's likely that you do too. You know who these research efforts are. You know who's been doing work in these areas. Please raise their visibility, contribute them to this space. Let's think about how to do that effectively. From the stakeholders forum meeting, we had some other ideas. There's, again, let's create a shared understanding of what the space looks like as expressed through literature. There's thinking about developing user stories with engaging with researchers in the different data interest groups, as well as the disciplinary groups, building that RDA community there. There's a definition of typology, maybe a controlled vocabulary that goes into that space. It could be useful. It's always a difficult topic. But again, these are possible activities. And I want to capitalize on that energy which it has. And here's some ideas, but what are your ideas? What would you find useful? And not in the grand scheme of this is the change that we need now, but what would you find useful for taking that next step in your context, in the space where you work, in the space where you think you can make a change, where you can have the conversations, where you can influence? What is it that you would find useful that this group might be able to help coordinate, create other centers of work around, things like that? Take a minute, think about it. And when you've thought about it, I invite you again to step up to the microphone, state your name, your affiliation, your role, and what is that output or activity that you think would take this effort to the next step, that you would find useful for improving or informing the evaluation of research. We want to use these as seeds for creating working groups.
Amy?
Yes.
We have a comment from Connie online.
Yay, Connie.
She's just said, maybe the group can also look at what can be evaluated. So Andrea mentioned policies. They might also include data management plans. Are they being evaluated, or is it just a mandate in certain institutions?
Okay. Thank you very much, Connie. Yes.
Yeah, Martin Rittman from Crossref again. So one of the things that I think probably everyone in this room agrees is part of this is data citations, and the STM is a group that works with a number of publishers and has an ongoing interest in promoting data citation from the publisher side. But I think there's still a great deal more that can be done working with publishers, and there are technical changes in publisher workflows that need to be done, and they're not always straightforward because their legacy, they've been focused on journal articles and journal citation and not necessarily considering software data, even ORCID identifiers or other kinds of identifiers. So I think there's work to do to really sell the value proposition of software citation to publishers and help them to overcome the barriers that they have to sharing the information that they have about data citation, other kinds of outputs.
So if you could just stay at the microphone, please. So in that space of thinking about value propositions for all the citations, so we have data citations, we have software citations. What else do you think might be in that space?
That's a really good question. Put me on the spot. I mean,
it's okay. It's only being recorded. It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. It'll be online for eternity with a persistent identifier, I hope. Yeah, I think to kind of not answer that question, I think what we need to do from the Crossref side is to be able to accommodate all of these kind of outputs, whether or not they have a DOI, whether or not they have some other kind of identifier. We're making steps in that direction. I guess one kind of example or an analogy for that is we've recently purchased a retraction watch database because that's an external source that has a lot of information relevant to Crossref records that we know is of interest to the community. If there were other external databases that had that kind of information, then we would be interested in incorporating that into our database. And I would love to see more links between Crossref DOIs and, for example, gene identifiers, protein identifiers, these kind of things, which we know other organizations have those links and we don't yet. So we're working on it.
So it's in the space of, you're really speaking more about the technological accommodation of globally unique identifiers type of situation, yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Although we have to bring the editors on board to be like, cultural accommodation of citations. Yes.
Hi, Shannon again. And for context, so I'm a research data librarian, and one of the things my colleagues and I do, colleagues who are not data curators, stewards, or anything, is we run metrics reports for our researchers. Right now, that is mostly publications, but one practical output that I think would be really useful once you kind of figure out what you're evaluating, I'm assuming metrics for different outputs will be part of that, having actual workflows and best practices for how to find those metrics, because most of them aren't going to be as easy as going on Web of Science and looking up cited references, so that others who are perhaps less familiar with it, are not in the RDA space, still feel empowered enough to be able to bring those practices to their institutions and actually do them for their researchers.
Thank you for that. I think, yes, the ease of use, if we go look at NOSEC's, the pyramid of culture change, if you're not familiar with it, just search NOSEC, N-O-S-E-K, pyramid of culture change, you will find it. And the foundational level of that is make it easy, right? Make it easy to do, make it easy to find, make it easy to implement. And in that space of workflows, if you haven't hooked up with the FAIR Workflows project yet, take a look at them. They're being run out of, I want to say DataCite, I believe. Someone who knows, correct me, please. But they were in the session, the last breakout session. So they have presentations there. Yes.
Yeah, so my name is Lauren Maxwell. I sit at Universitätsklinikum Heidelberg, which is in Germany, and I'm a researcher. So, I mean, just to start off, I find I'm fascinated by science on science and mega science and research on research. I think the whole thing is really interesting, and we have to understand what the impacts are. The landscape itself is very overwhelming. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of ongoing work here. One place where I see there's not as much investment, but there should be, is on the evaluation of data reuse. So what do people get for investing in their data? What are the rewards for the researchers who are really adding value to their data and making their data available? How are those data used? What is that use getting us? Because obviously we're really interested in data reuse. And there's a lot of work in the publication space. And if you talk to the folks in bibliometrics and altmetrics, they're gonna bring to you a list of concerns about PIDs come to mind. Like it's very hard for them to describe the landscape. It's, there's a lot of action going on in that space. But I think there's less on the data, the evidence of the impacts of data reuse. So just like less like the publication side, more the data side. So I think that could be an interesting place to contribute. And one thing I think we need to be open to, so obviously we want to, push the story of, how it's important to invest in your data. But if you speak to people who do invest in their data and they are, really passionate about open science and they make their data available, there are a number of harms that those people face, including that other people publish their data before they have a chance to publish their data, and there are many more. And I think one thing we need to be clear about is, and that's why I think machine actionable metadata is the best way forward, is that we have to be open to that. Open data causes harms. And I think part of the conversation that we need to have when we're talking about data reuse is we need a restructuring of the benefits landscape. We can't continue in the current landscape. So I'll just quote Peter Holub, who works in the bioinformatics space. He said, he knows a lot of chaired professors for data hoarding, but he knows no chaired professors for data sharing. And we really need to change that paradigm, and we're not. So I do think that if we, as RDA, we're focused on data reuse. If we really brought this conversation to data reuse and tried to do a better job of the metadata, then perhaps we could begin to tell the story of what's happening and tell it to policymakers and to institutions to try to get them to change their policies such that we can really incentivize investing in data as opposed to just incentivize investing in publications.
Thank you for that, and I really appreciated how you brought it back down to maybe some we can take action on now, which is this idea going back to how do we create this value proposition for making those initial investments that are necessary in things like developing metadata to go along with your data, of perhaps even thinking about encouraging all of the places where we put our research outputs to develop APIs so that the metadata can be machine actionable from some system, so we can have that broader system of assembling the metrics that Shannon was talking about earlier. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, Magid aussi from Cyclotron Soleil, France, which is a light source, like there are many all over Europe and even the world. And one thing I want to raise is that I'm in charge of the data policy implementation. So I'm in contact of all the scientists at Soleil. And I don't know if you know how it works, because there are scientists inside Soleil which receive almost 5,000 researchers coming from the world to do experiments, and they do a lot of work to help them. And now, in the process of implementation of the data policy, they are complaining because they say this is only added work for them, and they don't see what is the benefit for them. For example, we are already installing a data catalog, what is supposed to be put to their credits. If there is a paper, they will be cited. But all the work done to gather data, to harvest this, to implement metadata for their instruments and a lot of things, there is nothing foreseen yet to get credit with it for them. And in my work at SOI, I need them to help me to promote fair data and so, and they don't see what is the benefit for them. So I do not have the solution, but I think there's also something to think about in evaluation of the work they do in the research field.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for that very much. I think definitely part of what we're talking about when we're talking about that space of the evaluation of research is a restructuring of our understanding of who contributes to research and how those contributors are recognized, and rethinking the standard model that we currently have, which is the authors on a paper, the order of authors on the paper that has some meaning. And again, going back to this idea that we're working in a very complex space, and we're going to have to develop a more complex understanding of what contribution means to a research effort, and how can we creatively think about representing that. So it does have that ease of use. It is possible to capture. It doesn't present a barrier, and it still is mostly accurate, hopefully, in how it's representing the effort of research and how it's representing the credit of research. And from that, feeding into the evaluation of a research project, a researcher, a research system, a research instrument, all of these different aspects across the board. So in that kind of space, we've had some ideas out there, which I really appreciate, about these are some areas that we could work in. So do we have ideas from online?
Well,
Have I been missing one?
I just thought it might be useful to come back to your brackets, practical and realistic activities that you might find useful for the interest group to undertake. So Catherine Barker has made a really good point online about revisiting the summary from the community cross-fertilization workshop, which I mentioned earlier, where there was a suggestion for case studies on what is working, but also what's not working in the area of research evaluation, and looking for opportunities / funding to develop a register of experiences / case studies. So yeah, I just thought that might help bring it back to some practical, sort of tangible outcome that the interest group can work on.
Can start working on, yeah, as a working group. What do people think?
I mean, would
The
that
lights
be
are really
useful?
bright, and I can't see if you're nodding or yet not. I can't even really see if you're scowling. So I'm going to presume that you're not scowling, but I won't presume that you're all like, I'm in and I'm ready to work, unless you like stand up and say something.
The person online, the comment, getting funding, doing a landscape analysis of what we have and thinking about, gaps. That sounded great. Yeah.
All right, there's a vote of confidence. Other people.
I also have a
Yeah.
comment from Connie online again that's quite pertinent. So she says, I really second the point that was raised just before about incentivizing researchers to invest in data. We need to work out how to measure the adoption of fair data practice, metrics, possibly views, downloads, and citations, and other metrics to be able to evaluate good practice and drive culture change.
Yes, we do.
And Connie, I'm having difficulties copying and pasting comments from the chat into the notes. So if you wouldn't mind putting that in the notes, that would be so helpful. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for those ideas. So at this point, we have a focus group who is doing the mapping of RDA, the connection of other efforts, liaising with that. We have the idea of creating a literature collection about efforts in evaluation of research. I think this connects to the point that was raised around creating the case studies collection, what is working, what is not working. Some of the next steps in here is, if we would like to carry this work forward, that would mean starting a working group. Yay, work. It means we get something out at the end of it. We would have this collection of case studies. We could point to it and say, this worked really well. This, we tried it, maybe it did not work so well, but here's what we can learn from both of these things. Now, if you are interested in doing this work, there is a table. I don't know if you've heard. There is a table at the bottom of the collaborative notes where you can indicate your interest. This is just an indication, so it doesn't have to scare you. It's not a commitment, but it does mean we might come back to you and say, hey, you said you were interested. How interested are you? What can we do in this space? If it's not you, do you have someone in your team who could contribute to this space? How can we think about getting this work done? I mean, we have agreement. We have the knowledge that this work needs to be done. This change has to happen. So part and parcel of that is committing to getting this work done. So I'm going to ask you to really think hard about how we can take action in these spaces. Small steps are good. There's still steps forward. So bringing ourselves together to taking some of those steps. I used to teach, I'm good with uncomfortable silences.
So yesterday in the Engaging Researchers group, we did introduce a form to capture user stories. No one's filled it out yet, but I'll put the link in the notes. Basically, for those of you not familiar with, a user story is a one-sentence description of how a particular role might do something for a certain reason. This came out of the software development world. But the example that I keep using is, as a researcher, I want to know how my data is being used so I can prepare a promotion package. So yeah, you can fill those out. That would also give, I think, you all, the chairs, a better idea of what we as a community actually want to use the evaluation for. And therefore we can target it a little bit more. Or maybe nobody's going to fill it out, but I think everybody should, because it's one sentence.
It's one sentence. Yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up. I think that's a great idea. I mean, yeah, let's collaborate in that space. We don't need to create another form to collect those use stories if there's already one out there and going. Let's coordinate. We will coordinate. So look to the special notes. If you haven't gone there yet, it's a really short thing to write down. You can keep it in your notes. You can go back, find the link that Andrea mentioned, fill out that form. What are your use stories? What are your use cases for that space? And from there, we can start building that use case catalog, thinking about what's useful, what's not useful, what we'd like to see in the world.
Francis Crowley. I think one thing we should think about is, for example, the European Commission is very interested in this, as you know, and others too. Why would the Commission be interested? This is an economic organization, it's an economic unity with a political thing around it. So why would they be interested? Because it has great importance for the European economy. It's not of insignificance. So when we talk about the evaluation of research, we're really talking about the value of research. And we also have to think about that value in terms of impact. So if people fund something, say research, they want an impact, they want some kind of return on investment, and they want to see value and they want to see added value. It doesn't necessarily have to be direct economic value, but it has to be a value that impacts society. So when we're evaluating research, if we're only looking at publications, even if it's the publication of data or the publication of software or something like that, we have to show the value, and we can show value. We should be able to show impact or value in ways other than only publication. How we have impacted communities, how we have impacted policy, how we have impacted change, how we have impacted people's understanding of themselves. So these impact factors, if you want, these are also things I think we should take into account. Thank you.
Oh, and thank you for that. So I'm getting an idea from that, that there's some work to be done around assembling. What are these facets of value that research has? And perhaps that would be a useful space to explore in terms of thinking about where evaluation can and should apply. So there might be some work there. Do you think about about establishing from literature, from understanding, from contributions, like these are the values of research type thing, and use that as one of our starting points to say, and this is how this can be evaluated. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
I just want to add to that.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point. Ingrid from Dance mentioned it in her last presentation around the different values of researchers. So impact, societal impact, leadership. It's not just publications, not just data. So maybe we do need to broaden the scope a little bit about how we can demonstrate the value of research more broadly.
Yeah, to the point that evaluation of research is demonstrating the value of research. And so what are the areas, to your point, of what those values might be? And that might give us a broader appreciation of how evaluation can be created.
Yeah, and Compound Thompson again, another point. Contribution to research, there are also the citizens. And more one talks about citizen science. And so a number of people, well, in my domain of health, all the people participating in clinical trials are also informing research. And there is very little thought of in our system about how to recognize their contribution, whether it is citizen gathering data on butterflies or I don't know what, or participants in research protocols. And I was wondering if in a little corner of this group, there could be some thoughts about evaluation of research. It's not only for researchers or engineers or contributing to the knowledge, but there are other people, and there is not much, to my knowledge, on this part, and I think it would be worthwhile.
Yeah, thank you very much for that thought. I agree. This goes back to the topic that we were talking about before about recreating, restructuring what contributions to research look like, what contributions might be considered. And thank you very much for bringing up that aspect of community science, community research, and those other contributors out of the more traditional space that we think in. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, just another, I guess, point of view on evaluation. I'm not sure whether this is in scope or out of scope for this group, so you can decide. But around just evaluating the integrity of research as well. And it's been demonstrated already that, for example, papers that are published with data sets and other evidence of good open science practices, they're not going to come from a paper mill, or they're much less likely to be based on made up data and this kind of thing. So that's another aspect of evaluation, maybe a different user story from the ones that mentioned a moment ago.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. I think, when we're talking about scope, evaluation of research is huge. There are a lot of different pieces in that space, which is why we are trying to structure this interest group to take advantage of all of the other work that is being done in these areas around evaluation of integrity, evaluation of reproducibility, taking a look at what the contributor structure looks like. What are those pieces? So trying to bring those pieces together into this overall space of evaluation. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so to go back to Francis's point as well, so CIHR has done a lot of work on what's called knowledge translation, and they've written up like a comparison of different knowledge translation frameworks for understanding things behind, so what actually comes downstream of this publication, what are the effects on these different populations. So I think we could start with the nice work that they've done in that space. So one thing that hasn't happened in that space is again, machine actionable metadata. So we don't, besides like very select case studies, we really don't have a way to tell that story. And that goes back to one of the last speaker's points about, the folks who participate in this research, they want to understand what happens. When they said their data were shared, what were the effects of that? They actually really want to know. And I think that this is very important for those of us working in data governance and working on these studies, is can we tell the actual story of what's happening? And so then we have to go back to provenance metadata. And again, persistent identifiers. So in terms of where we could invest in this space, it could really be like, if we don't have the provenance metadata, we don't have, you know, an effective PID system, we can't tell the story, except besides these very selective case studies, which is, you know, it's not the story. So I think that could be a nice place to invest.
Yeah, thank you very much, provenance metadata. Yeah, you're right. We can't build systems that would create this future we would like to see without that. Absolutely, as an item in there. So thank you very much for that contribution as well. I think at this point, thank you for all of your thoughts and your ideas, areas of work that we might want to together as a community to participate in and communicate about to others in our community, that this is important, valid work to think about, that these, again, are necessary changes. And I think the points that people have brought up around thinking about the value of research, the different facets of evaluation, what those might be, as well as the other areas that are involved in this, connect to the work that we're talking about. So identified areas of interest we have so far. There is the continued mapping of RDA and other associated efforts to make sure that we are not recreating wheels, that we are in fact building together out of work and investment that's already been made. Associated with that, there's creating an extensive collection of work and writing that has already been done in this area, again, with the effort of understanding the space, making sure that we have considered the different aspects, whether it's from thinking about who is contributing, what the systemic biases might be that we would like to try to avoid, how to create these systems going forward in the future, thinking about the other people that we can work with in these spaces. I really love the use cases, and I would like to identify that as a future area of work and collaboration, Andrea, with the group, that the Engaging Researchers group there. So I think we have a couple of different areas to work. And as I said before, if you are interested in an area, please sign up in the notes. Please come talk to Emma and myself after we're done with this session. And let's talk about where we can take action, where we can make this work, where we can take these steps so that we can move even a little bit in the direction of, you know, creating a revolution in research and how it's evaluated. Because I think we all understand and appreciate to get to that point where data is considered a first-class research object, where software, code, compute environments are part of that, where we fully recognize the contributions of all of the contributors to research is the place that we would like to see, is the place that's fully going to support research data and how it's shared and managed and create that better space that we're looking for. So with that, I'd like to bring everyone together, shift a little bit into a near future. Our next plenary, P22, is going to be completely remote. And so what should our goals be for the next plenary? 6 months from now, how would we like to see, what are the changes we would like to see within the next 6 months? What is the work we would like to engage in? What would we like to accomplish? What would be useful to you? What do you think you can do? Because it's not just us. It's all of us. I mean, we can sit in a Zoom room and just be like, yeah, things should change. We should do something about that. Don't you think? Yeah. But what do we want to see in the next 6 months? What can we do? Yeah.
Maybe just a conversation with the persistent identifier folks and the provenance metadata folks, and just, you know, what is, I hate the phrase low hanging fruit, but what is the low hanging fruit that we could try to, you know, work on to demonstrate a bit more of the knowledge translation that we expect to be happening, whether it's related to publications or to data or to software code. And then also a bit of better metadata to describe FAIR, so we can then understand how investments in FAIR actually affect investments in knowledge translation. I think that might be a nice place to start. I'm a little reluctant, like, so just that scoping exercise, because I have been following this space for, I don't know, at least 10 years. And there's so much information. That's a very, very big task to accomplish in 6 months, especially if there's no funding. So I personally could not, I could tell you what I've learned, but I can't commit to that. It's actually too big. But if we were just to take one aspect, there is a lot of interesting work in provenance metadata, and I don't think there's a lot of interesting work in provenance metadata on the kind of knowledge translation side. So probably talk to folks at CHR who have really, spent a lot of time in this space, and then talk to the PID people and try to, get those folks together and some facilitated conversations about where would be the easiest places to intervene. Because the folks who want to look at policy impact and, the impact of these, like, for instance, let's take, for instance, NIH's data management and sharing plan, or we take, for instance, journal policies around, data availability. Those folks are not able to look at the impact because they don't have the metadata. So they can't, you don't have the PIDs in place. We don't have, there's lots of problems with ORCID, whatever, you can talk to them. But the point is they can't do their job of looking at policy impact because the metadata is not there. So I think provenance might be good.
Thank you for that. Okay, here's a proposal, because it's always easier to react to a proposal. I get that. So proposal for P22, try this on. Tell me where it goes wrong. Tell me what you'd like to see instead. So we have some PID folks talk about where they're at, the tools they're developing, the places they would like to see some movement on as one part. We have, going back to Matthew's earlier suggestions, some funders talk about what they are doing in this space. What are the experiments that they've done, how that looks to them, how it's working out. And maybe we report on any developments that we have at that point from the use cases that you've been collecting, and see where we go from there, because who knows, crystal balls, not so great. And then we can also talk about any further work that we have done on the mapping task force. Yes, that thing. And maybe if we're lucky, between now and then, we'll do something crazy, like set up a Zotero group or something for a collection of literature, and make a plan for scoping the microphone. I'm so sorry. Scoping the space. I think this seems a little like overachieving, but maybe not. What do you think about that for like a P22 program for this group? Does that sound good, bad, other? What do you want? All right.
Yeah, it's Ariasmi from RDA Europe. I think that's a very, very good program. Just coming to think about also, I mean, if we are doing this landscape analysis of our own activities, and we have also, just to, I'm not so aware of it, maybe you can clarify to me, you also have some task about following other initiatives. So from the European point of view, especially the QARA is extremely central. So have you been following the new upcoming QARA working groups?
Yes.
And it would be really nice maybe if we have that landscape report, even in some sort of draft form, to be really shared with the relevant groups there, just to make sure that we avoid duplication of effort. I haven't myself actually followed what are the new QARA working groups, and that's why I'm asking that if there are some which would benefit from our things what we already have or being built.
Yes, thank you for that. And perhaps I skipped over, between now and P22, we would expect as an interest group to continue with the stakeholder forum conversations. I think the goal for that is like once every 2 months or something. And QARA is part of that stakeholder group. So as long as someone from QARA can make that, and the other liaison groups can make that as well, I think we're better able to maintain those communications, which is one of the goals in that space. So, but thank you for the reminder. Definitely. Thanks.
Yeah, Francis Crowley, yeah. I was thinking about the core groups too, Ara, before you said anything too. I was thinking about them in terms, because I had looked at them, and what I see when I look at I'm also involved with one group that's being set up, but when I look at them, because I was thinking about your work ahead too, some of the things, one of the things that's unclear in these working groups, as far as I can see, and also in the one I'm involved with, is what output should we have?
Mhm.
What should we be trying to achieve in the short term, medium, or long term? So with those outputs there. The other thing is, the other thing that seems unclear is the working methodology of the working groups. Now these working groups are just newly established or being established, so I think part of what they do during the establishment is look at these questions, but just how to go about doing the analysis seems to me to be a bit unclear in them. And I do think it's a good touchstone, these working groups as well, for the work you're proposing here. So I'm really interested in the outcomes. There's something else I want to say, but I think that went away somewhere. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And in terms of like, what are the outcomes that would be useful? I mean, we asked you the same question, right? We're all like, so we want to do stuff, what's going to be useful? And really, I think in part, looking to some of the use case work to help us better define those ideas about what is working, what's not working, what is the thing we do need in this space that would be useful. So yes, and you've thought of a thing.
Yeah, sorry. Now I know what I wanted to say. Well, the more important thing for me anyway is what I was thinking you could do is really try to demonstrate, especially with regard to data, where it's impactful. Of course, it goes through everything in society and so forth, but we have to have some very specific areas where we can say research impacts in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of landscaping, but it's the kind of landscaping where we try to show in a more exact way. So data curation helps this way, data collection helps this way, data repositories help this way, or something like that. But we need to get to value.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we don't have to quantify the value, but we have to show the impact. Anyway,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you again for amplifying the point before about that. You know, establishing the values of research will drive how we approach evaluation of research, and you know, I think this is an important area of work to think about those facets of value, where the value of research is seen in the world that we live in day to day, whether we're participating in government policies, politics, business, all of those types of things. And I invite this group to think about how they would like to engage in that work of establishing that, of creating some form of output, matrix, whatever, visualization, whatever is going to best suit that purpose of saying, you know, this is why society does research. This is where different aspects of research have impact across society. I imagine there is a largish body of literature that approaches some of this, so we wouldn't be starting from scratch, certainly, in that space. And so let's think about that. Let's think about what that work would look like. And maybe we aren't ready to commit to that work right this minute. Maybe 3 months from now, maybe it's another topic of conversation at the next P22 meeting. So let's keep it in mind as an important area of work and how we want to approach that. For those who are like, again, if you have resources to contribute, that's what this work takes is resources, whether that's your time, your people's time, money, funding. We all know RDA is largely a volunteer organization, so that when we ask for people to work on this, it's scraps and bits of time, but it's time for important work. So thinking about how that does end up working out for you. And yeah, let's change the evaluation of research. Let's do it as a community. Let's do it together. Let's be inclusive. And let's take those small steps that are going to take a difference. So thank you, everyone, very much for your contributions. Is there anything else online? Nothing else online? Please, this has been the last breakout session of International Data Week, and you have made it. You have been participative. You have been engaged, and I really appreciate that. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Give yourselves a round of applause, please, because I am American, and this is what we do. And Thank you. If you have ideas, you want to talk, come up and talk with each other. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.